Hi, you guys. Welcome back to Rocket City Yardstead. Getting ready to work on a project. First, I needed to get my muffins out of the oven. Do you guys ever impulse buy at the grocery store? We saw these gluten-free maple donut muffins from Miss Jones Baking Company at Walmart. And you guys, there's no corn in these. So we decided we were going to make them. And hopefully they're really good. They smell amazing. But that is not the project I have going today. If you didn't see the video where I visited my cousin's farm, they sent me home with a full tote of apples. And I have weighed out 2 big bowls of apples. They're 8 pounds each to turn into apple butter. I've already made one batch of apple butter this year, just a couple days ago, from this big tote. But I'm still trying to figure out what all I want to do with these apples. And apple butter was high on the list. So the first thing I really need to do is scrub up all the apples that are going to go in my apple butter. These came straight off of their trees at their farm. And they definitely have spots on them. They just need to be cleaned up. We weighed this last night after I'd already pulled out 16 pounds last night. I'd already made a batch of apple butter that had 8 pounds, and this still weighs 43 pounds. So we have a lot of apples to go through. I'm also going to freeze dry some apples. My cousin Barb tried some freeze dried apples that I made, and she said she thought they'd be excellent for putting in oatmeal. And so I'm going to make her some freeze dried apples with some of these. She gave me the raw product. I'm going to return her a processed product. I also saw that there's a recipe for apple pie jam, and I thought maybe we'd try a batch of that just to see how it goes. Because when am I going to have this many free apples, y'all? I don't know that that's ever going to happen again in my life, so we're going to take advantage. I know that applesauce would be a pretty standard thing that people would make, but I actually have plenty of applesauce canned up in my pantry. And we also have apple slices for making pies and cobblers and things like that canned up. I did that last year. And so some of the things I would normally do, I don't need to do. So the apple butter, we for sure wanted. Freeze-dried apples were an absolute must. And then everything else is just getting to kind of play around. I am thinking about, I saw some recipes for meatballs that had apples in them. They were a pork meatball. And I saw recipes for apple chicken breakfast sausage. And I thought that sounded really good. And we could make some of that and have them cooked and in the freezer and just a ready-made protein source. So I'm still working through all my thoughts on these apples, but ooh, I got to some of the other apples. My cousin picked about half a bucket worth of apples from a different tree. He didn't know what kind of apples they were, but they look like they're probably related to a Golden Delicious. And I have no idea what these are, but they're tasty. They kind of have that whole sweet tart thing going on, and they make delicious apple butter. The first batch I made, we had about half of a jelly jar left over after I canned it all up. And so it's been in our fridge, and y'all, it's so good. I'm just going to keep working through these apples, and we'll come back after they're done and move on to the next step of the apple butter. All right, you guys, now that I have all these apples cleaned up, we are going to get my peeler attachment put together. I've been having some trouble. My peeler part wasn't working, but I just figured out was wrong. So I've got that in there now. And then I have this large core and slicer that we're going to attach. I keep using this attachment. I've had it for probably a decade, but when I first got it, I used it regularly. And then about a year later, I got an email with a refund for the attachment. And it turned out that it was a counterfeit. And Amazon refunded the money for everybody who had gotten this attachment through them when it was this batch. They said stop using it, but I'd already been using it for a year and it worked well. So I just have kept using it and I'm grateful to have it because it makes peeling the apples so much easier. There we go. Now, I did just remember something I forgot to do that I need to do. I want to go ahead and get all of my vinegar for my apple butter into the pot. That way our apples don't brown too much. So I'm making a double batch here, so I actually need 4 cups. That seems like, ooh. Did you guys see that? There was a ton of mother in here. I don't particularly want that in my apple butter. Not to be too gross, but if you've never seen the mother from vinegar, it kind of looks like a booger. It's just like this slimy stuff. There we go. Here, let me show you guys. There is the mother. I love this so much. Watching the apples peel like this. Good thing my counter's clean, but they're so fun and festive. Bring you guys in here closer so you can see up close how nicely this works. Let's get that closer. Turn it on. Some of my apples have some bad spots, like right there, so I'll just cut that off before I put it into the bowl. I'm just going to keep using my peeler here and get all 16 pounds of apples peeled. I still have about 12 more apples that I need to get into this pot, but as you can see, it's really full. So I'm going to get the rest of my liquid added in here and I'm going to get it cooking because these apples are going to cook down a lot. So now we need 4 cups of apple cider. Try not to splash it everywhere. Whew. And we will get this on kind of a medium-low heat. These apples should cook down a lot and then I'll have room to get all the apples in there. So back to peeling. I got the rest of my apples peeled and now I have this huge bowl of apple peels and cores. And I thought I would tell you guys what I'm going to do with it. So I had contemplated trying apple scrap vinegar. I've never made that before. And I really just didn't want all of this to go to waste. But yesterday, I was scrolling through Facebook and there was a post in one of my freeze drying groups that I'm a member of that was just perfect timing. And it was about a new study from Cornell University where they were talking about using apple scraps from cider making this time of year. And they were talking about it in a commercial capacity. They said something like 400 tons of apple scraps go to waste every year. And it turns out if you freeze dry them, blend it into a powder, and then put it in. The study was for commercial beef meatballs. They said at a ratio of 20%, people with just regular untrained palates couldn't tell the difference, that there was apple added to it. And I thought that was really interesting because not only was it a way to use the apple scraps and not let them go to waste, but it also was talking about the fiber and some of the micronutrients and stuff that you are adding to the meatballs if you do that. And I thought, just because they're talking about doing it at a commercial scale doesn't mean we can't do it at home. And so we're going to give it a try. I thought, people put powdered zucchini and other vegetables in their meatballs. Why not apple scraps? So I'm going to freeze these because I actually need to use the freeze dryer for some apple slices. But I will come back at some point when I have time and the freeze dryer is available, and we're going to try and turn this into a powder and add it to meatballs, because look at all of this. Wouldn't it be fantastic if it didn't just have to go to waste? Well, I always laugh when I see people overfill their pots, and today it's me. I thought I was going to get them all in, but all that juice the apples are putting off has it kind of floating above the rim of the pot. So I'm going to have to pull some of these out, and I think just cook them in the liquid after I pull the rest of the apples out and blend them up. The apples that fit in my pot are ready to blend up. So the recipe calls for doing this through a food mill. I figure I have already peeled and cored these, and so I just find it easier to use the blender. Maybe if I had an electric food mill, but I just don't feel like doing all that cranking that I have to do with the food mill I have. So I find the blender just a better option for me. But we'll get these all blended up. You can see how nice and soft they are. I do want to make sure that there is plenty of liquid in here to get the blender going well. There is a little bit of skin left on my apples because the peeler doesn't get everything. I don't mind that, and the blender will blend that all up. All right. So I like a really, really nice and smooth apple butter. So I don't know how well you can see it, but that blended up almost like baby food. But it'll make such a nice texture for our apple butter. And we'll just finish the apples that are currently in this pot, and then I will add the rest of my apples that didn't fit to cook down in the remaining liquid. Ooh, that's tangy, y'all. All that apple cider vinegar in there and no added sugar yet. So there is a low sugar or lower sugar apple butter recipe from the Center for Home Food Preservation. It uses sucralose to sweeten the apple butter. And if you guys saw where we made the cherry jam, we made a lower sugar one for my mom. But she said she wasn't sure she would really eat apple butter enough to make it worth making that recipe. So we're just making the regular recipe. I've actually never made this in the crock pot before. I'm doing that today because I have an appointment this afternoon. And so I didn't want to have to turn off what was on my stove while I was gone. And I've seen people make their apple butter in crock pots. And I figured that way it doesn't have to be babysat while I'm gone. So I guess we'll find out together how well this does. Oh, geez. Oh, this is not going to work. I haven't added any of the sugar or spices yet. And that's how full my crock pot is. So maybe I'm gonna have to rethink this. Well, you guys, I've had to pivot. The crock pot was not gonna work. I had way too much. And frankly, this pot is a bit fuller than I would want it. But hopefully we can make do with this because I've been using this one as my canner. I really don't want to have to switch to it. I have 4.5 cups of white sugar here that we're going to add. Oh man, so full. And then we also need to add our brown sugar. We're going to add 4.5 cups of brown sugar. Good night. Oh man, y'all. So full. And then the last two things we need to add are 4 tablespoons of cinnamon. And 2 tablespoons of clove. Now I'm going to see if I can get this sugar mixed in without overflowing the pot. Sugar is not actually supposed to increase your volume once it dissolves, so hopefully oh y'all, this is a bad call. I'm gonna have to clean that pot. This is just gonna have to be an extra dishes day between the crock pot and this pot, but I will know for future making double batches of apple butter which vessels I need to cook it in. Because while technically this looks like it would fit, the batch I made the other day spit everywhere, even with several inches of space. And so I can't imagine what a mess this would make if I left it in here. But I'd like to get it all incorporated at least before we switch pots. If you know me personally, you might be getting some apple butter for a present this year. It smells wonderful though, you guys. All that cinnamon and clove. I can't remember if I mentioned this earlier or not, but the first time I ever made apple butter, I think I used the Ball recipe. And no shade to Ball. You guys know I make a lot of recipes from the Ball website and their canning books. But that apple butter just was not what I was expecting. It just tasted like highly seasoned applesauce. And we love to go to the Smoky Mountains for little weekend trips and stuff. And there's this place there called the Apple Barn, and they do apple butter. And it's delicious. But we got a jar of it one year, and I saw it had the vinegar in it, and it had the cloves. And that was when I learned, for me, those are the 2 ingredients that really take it from applesauce to apple butter. So the recipe from the National Center for Home Food Preservation, if you're canning, it's much more that kind of recipe. It's got that tanginess. It's got that distinct clove flavor. It's so good. It's already looking more like apple butter, you guys. Although it's much too thin at this point. All right, as much as I don't want to, I'm gonna get this pot all cleaned up so I can transfer our apple butter to a bigger pot. I am gonna actually include this in the video. We'll see how this goes. I'm gonna try and dump this pot into the other one. Oh, it's so heavy. Nope. Y'all, I'm just not that brave. Y'all, I started to just try and dump this, but I know myself. I would have lost a ton of this apple butter if I had tried to dump the pot. So we're going to ladle it in until we get it significantly lower in the pot. And with my induction cooktop, I think I can probably just turn this down to a low while I'm gone to my appointment this afternoon. And it should probably be okay. All right, y'all, let's try this. There we go. Scrape out as much as I can get. Don't want to waste any of this. So now I'm just going to get this up to a simmer. We're going to let it simmer until it's cooked enough. The directions say you want it to mound on a spoon or to not have a liquid ring around the edge when you stir it. So I didn't find the mounding thing super clear, but the liquid edge directions I found a little more helpful. But I'll show you what it looks like when it's ready. Now that the apple butter is finally in the right size pot, I cleaned up the dishes that I ended up I shouldn't have used in the first place. And now I can get back to working on apples for freeze drying. I ran them through the attachment on my KitchenAid, just like I did the apples for the apple butter. But I'm going through and cutting them just into these tiny little pieces because I think they'll work really well in oatmeal, kind of like when you buy the instant oatmeal that's like apple cinnamon. At least that's my goal, because that is what my cousin specifically asked for, was apples for her oatmeal. I made some freeze-dried apple slices for my niece that we took her when we got to see her on our trip. And I had some to take my brother's family, the rest of them as well. And so Barb tried one and thought they would be great for this purpose. But little tiny pieces I think are going to work best. So I'm just going to do this with all of these apples. I think this is probably enough to fill my freeze dryer. And then she said she would like cinnamon sugar ones. So I'm going to toss them with some cinnamon sugar before I load them up on the trays. Once I get them all sliced up, I'll show you what they look like, and we'll get them all cinnamon sugared and put on the trays for the freeze dryer. Now that my apples are all diced up, I want to get my freeze dryer going. So I'm just gonna shut that door, turn it on, and now it can cool for the 15 minutes it requires. So we'll go get the cinnamon and sugar on those apples and get them put on these trays. I don't really have an exact ratio here. I'm just kind of gonna eyeball this and see what looks good. I do want her apples to have a good cinnamon sugar flavor to them. I'll just toss it up and see what it looks like. I do think that using the tool for the KitchenAid along with slicing made really nice sized little apple pieces for oatmeal, or maybe even baked goods. But we'll just have to see. I think when they come out of the freeze dryer, I might make some oatmeal for my mom and put some of these in it just so we can see how it works. But I think that looks good. So I'm just going to get these spread out onto trays. I don't know for sure if I did enough apples. So I might need to peel a few more, but we'll just see. I didn't want to do too many. I figured it'd be better to not have enough and need to do more than the other way around and have apples I had to figure out what to do with. I don't want to put them on here too thickly. That will make them take longer to freeze dry. This is about what a tray of apples will look like. I just got my freeze dryer loaded with our 4 trays of apples. I did end up having to peel 5 more apples. So in total, there's 21 apples in here. So that is a good amount of apples out of our tote that we got to use for this. I'm I'm expecting this to take probably around 36 hours. I'll be interested to see how long it takes because I've never done apples that are diced this thin and small. The more surface area, the faster things tend to freeze dry. And so we'll just see how long it takes, but they might go faster than I expect. I will definitely show you when they're all done. So you guys, I expected to get more done today, but it's about time for my appointment, and I don't think I have time to do more than just getting the apples in the freeze dryer and the apple butter done today. So I'll still be able to get this canned up, but I think that's probably going to be the end of my projects for the day. But since I showed you guys those, what were they called? Maple donut muffins that I was making earlier from that box mix, I thought we would try it together. The only thing I did differently, I guess I did 3 things differently. I used dairy-free butter and almond milk instead of regular butter and regular milk. And because I have apple cider for making the apple butter, I substituted apple cider in the glaze instead of water. But let's break into this and give it a bite. Oh man. These are really good. Definitely a treat kind of item. They're very sweet, but they taste like fall, especially substituting that apple cider in there. And the box recommended putting some cinnamon sugar on top, so I did that. These are fantastic. If you just want an easy gluten-free thing to make that's just a box mix, this is fantastic. Or if you want to make something for somebody that you know who's gluten-free, I would recommend these. I will look and see if I can find a link for them. I bought them at Walmart, but I think they're just like a seasonal flavor, but they're fantastic. So I'm going to get ready for my appointment, and I will see you guys back here later today. As happens sometimes, I forgot to turn my microphone back on when I got home from my appointment. But the apple butter had cooked down about 2 quarts, even turned down as low as my stove could go. And I do want to show you this footage because this is where we can see the mounded apple butter. You see how it holds its shape there on the spoon? That is exactly what we're looking for. And so it's ready to can. Today, I am using a pint jar to can my apple butter. You can use half pint jars, you can use pint jars, you can even can this apple butter in quart jars. Then we're going to debubble as always, just make sure we don't have any air pockets in there. In good canning practice here, we're going to wipe our rim down with a damp paper towel or rag. Just make sure there's nothing on that rim. Make sure there's no chips, and then we'll put our lid on and get our ring on fingertip tight. Pop this in the canner and finish canning up the rest of our apple butter. Before I put a lid on this jar, I wanted to show you guys. You see how that apple butter is nice and mounded in the jar? It's still this really lovely consistency. It spreads beautifully. So this is exactly what we're looking for. I've got a canner load full of 10 pints of apple butter. I also got an extra pint that wouldn't fit, and I filled the jar we had in the fridge. It was about half empty, so we got about 2¼ cups beyond the 10 pints. That's pretty awesome. So I wanted to talk a little bit about canning this recipe. For one thing, I think they've made a typo in the recipe. There are directions for canning half pints, pints, and quarts. And it tells you it's going to make, I think it said 8 to 9 pint jars. Well, I have consistently gotten about 5 pints from a single batch with a little bit extra. So I think the recipe should have said half pint jars. So if you go to make this recipe, I'll link it down below. Just be aware of that. If you're canning pint jars, you're going to get about half of what they said you would. The other thing I wanted to talk about is proper canning procedure. So You do not have to sterilize your jars anymore most of the time when you're canning. If you're canning things for 10 minutes or longer, they say the jars get sterilized when the canning process happens. Well, that's a little bit different for some things. If you're making jellies, or in this case, apple butter, the pints and the half pints only have to can for 5 minutes. I did not sterilize my jars. So I'm actually going to can them for 10 minutes. That's how long quart jars call for. And I am just kind of saving myself a step and canning for an extra 5 minutes. But if you want to take the time and sterilize your jars beforehand, then you only have to can it for 5 minutes. So I'm going to bring this to a rolling boil, and then I'll set my timer for the 10 minutes that I'm going to can it for. All right, y'all, our apple butter has finished processing for the 10 minutes. So I'm gonna take my lid off and let this cool for about 5 minutes, and then we'll pull these out of the canner. These are ready to come out of the canner. We'll put these here on the counter, or in my case, the table, and let them cool for 12 to 24 hours, just until they're nice and room temperature, and we know those lids are sealed good. So y'all, I am really happy about all of this. I've got 15 pints of apple butter total. I've got all those apples in the freeze dryer, and we've made a huge dent in this tub of apples. So I think maybe it's more than half of the apples have been used now. So I'm pretty stoked about that. But here we go, apple butter. I will bring you guys back when the apples that are in the freeze dryer are done, and we'll try them in some oatmeal. I can't eat that, but we'll have my mom give it a taste test for you guys. So I'll see you when they're ready. Good morning, you guys. It's been a couple of days and our freeze-dried apples are done. I have never done them like this before, where I use that slicer attachment on my KitchenAid, and so they end up so nice and thin. We love them. They just melt in your mouth. So they are a little bit dry because they're freeze-dried. But anyway, the thing my cousin wanted these for was for oatmeal. And so I'm actually going to make my mom some oatmeal for breakfast this morning, and we're going to try putting some of these in there. But we think they'd be fantastic for snacks as well. So we're actually going to do another freeze dryer load and just have some that we can keep, because we're going to give most of these to my cousin Barb. So I'm guessing, I don't really know, maybe about 1/8 of a cup of apples for a single serving of oatmeal. And we'll come back and I'll show you how it turns out. All right, you guys, our oatmeal is done. And I wanted to see if I could get a piece of the apple and show you, because I am very happy about how these apples cooked up. It's hot, so I don't want to burn myself, but look at how nice and pliable this is. It just rehydrated and heated through perfectly. There's a little bit of texture to the apple, but it's very much like a cooked apple, maybe something you'd find in like an apple pie, or if you did fried apples on the stove. So that texture is perfect. And these little thin pieces of apple are the way to go for making apples to put in oatmeal. I am going to give a taste to the oatmeal. My mom won't mind if I take a little bite of her oatmeal, but I just want to see how it all goes together. Make sure I get a little bit of apple in the bite. It's good. I added a little bit of pie spice to it, and this is new to us, but it's an erythritol and monk fruit brown sugar substitute. It tastes really good in here. So I think my mom's really going to enjoy this, and I think these apples, my cousin Barb is going to be thrilled to have these. So I'm really happy with how it all turned out. So thanks for hanging out with me while we made apple butter and freeze-dried apples. I will link the recipe for the apple butter down below. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day. I'll see you next time. Bye.